yesterday. And most certainly, the engagement that we had yesterday was highly robust. The topic Leading with Integrity, Reimagining Ethical Educational Leadership for Transformative Learning is a topic that we thought was important, but I think yesterday we really recognized how much of an appetite there is for this kind of conversation. A colleague who you'll meet later on, Dr. Omotayo, sent us a Daily Maverick opinion piece this morning that also indicated that this conversation is happening across the country. And we really look forward to everybody's contribution, but more especially our audience who are here loyally with us, who will continue the conversation further. But to open day 2 of the conference and to welcome everybody into the conversation today is Mr. Dion van der Merwe from the University of Johannesburg. Dion is a colleague. He is from the Education Psychology Department, and he has done some extensive work in the area of EdPsych. And so Dion, over to you for the welcome and introduction.
Thank you, Prof. Kat, and thank you once again for joining us this afternoon. Today's conversation continues with the theme, Leading with Integrity, Reimagining Ethical Educational Leadership for Transformative Learning, which invites us to just reflect on what ethical leadership truly looks like in our schools, in our communities, as well as our institutions. We are honored to have a powerful panel of influential professionals, strategic visionaries, and change makers with us today, which includes Prof. Nadine Peterson, Prof. Bonang Mohale, Dr. Tony Shabangu, and Prof. Vitalis Chikoko. You'll also hear poetry, participate in reflections, and closing learnings. So stay with us throughout the journey today. And just a quick note on interaction today. There will be a dedicated Q&A session later in the program, but please don't wait. Feel free to share your questions or statements in the chat box at any time. And we also encourage concise questions directed to a specific speaker or topic. While questions will be responded to, keep in mind that statements will be acknowledged only. So stay engaged this afternoon. Listen in and let your voice be heard. Prof. Kat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dion, for that lovely introduction. We'll begin the conversation this afternoon with a keynote address from Professor Nadine Peterson. Unfortunately, due to many deanery commitments, she's unable to be with us here today, but she did send her best wishes, as well as her thoughts are going to be with us. And I did send her some of the information from yesterday, but she did send us a recording that we will be showing today, in terms of her contribution. Professor Nadine Peterson is the Executive Dean in the Faculty of Education at the University of Johannesburg. She holds a doctoral degree and is an NRF C2 rated researcher. Her work focuses on teaching, engagement, and service learning in teacher education. She received an international award from the IARSLCE in 2019. And Nadine also serves on several boards and contributes to education policy and media discussions. The one thing that is very special about this keynote address, but also Professor Peterson's participation in our midst today, though it's a recorded conversation, is that very recently, Professor Peterson exposed the Jobs for Cash scandal. And this involved UJ graduate students who were solicited to pay cash or money for getting jobs at schools. And this has made the media in News 24 and other spaces. So some of you may have read some of those interactions online. And so I really hope that you will engage with her keynote address today, particularly because what we speak about in terms of the kind of fraudulent activities and the kind of unethical activities that we started speaking about yesterday now takes on a very real face in terms of this Jobs for Cash scandal. So with that, Mitesh, is it possible for you to start and begin the keynote address via the video recording? Thank you so much.
So, good afternoon. My name is Nadine Peterson, and as Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Johannesburg, it is an honor for me to address you today at the opening of the Leadership Conference 2025 with the theme of Leading with Integrity, Reimagining Ethical Educational Leadership for Transformative Learning. I think that the timelines or the urgency of this conference and the conference theme is important. As I speak to you today, I speak not necessarily as a scholar of the disciplinary field of educational leadership. I've written some books, I've served on some boards and some corporate structures, and I've held various leadership roles in education. But I think where I speak from today is from a deeply personal journey of leading and also of learning about how to lead in education. And so I'm hoping that some of the ideas and the stories that I share will resonate with you. The relevance of this conversation for South Africa is vital. We live in a country where it seems that ethical leadership in general has been abandoned in pursuit of grace and favor jobs for friends and family, and where the prime motive seems to be on enriching oneself. I'm deeply saddened by this because in Africa, we have the idea of Ubuntu. I am because we are. As a philosophical frame for leadership, it implies two things. One, that leaders are not standing over communities, but standing with them. And two, that leadership is framed by Ubuntu. And if it's framed by Ubuntu, it's relational and it's not transactional. However, what disappoints me the most is that many political and institutional leaders in this country, but also in the rest of Africa, and in many international contexts, but I'm specifically speaking about Africa and South Africa. Many of our leaders invoke Ubuntu and African philosophy in speeches, but often act in ways that are self-serving and unethical, with actions that are then for the good of the I, the me, and not the we. And in the process, they cannibalize, they distort, and they dismantle the ideas of Ubuntu. What's even more shocking is that far too many South African leaders do not seem to think that there's anything wrong with this kind of behavior. It's sheer pervasiveness in our country, in practically all our institutions, shows that criminal behavior is endorsed and accepted. And it's accepted in the kinds of institutions that are supposed to be serving the people. And the one that gets to me are the educational and the health institutions. And we see this in the qualified audits, the millions in unauthorized expenditure from these entities, the bribery, the transgression of procurement policies, and so forth. Ubuntu then, as a leadership frame, becomes more symbolic than it actually is structural, because we can't see it embedded in the structures and the processes of our institutions. So how do I think about and how do I frame ethical leadership? Now, there are various typologies, there are principles, there are models for ethical leadership in the literature. I've taken from a few of these and I've incorporated them into this talk today. The first of these is respect. For me, respect includes valuing the skills and contribution of members or of staff at all levels. It negates this historical view of leaders demanding respect from juniors. Respect for me is earned, and the only way for leaders to earn that is by walking the talk in as far as it is possible. Respect for me also goes together with an accompanying value of care. So I always see respect and care forming part of the same entity, the same kind of unit of description. And when I speak about care and respect, I don't mean some wishy-washy version of tiptoeing around issues when there is a duty to speak up. It is possible as a leader to tell someone who is not performing optimally what is wrong, and then to offer advice and support towards improvement. A second principle is that of accountability. Ethical leaders hold themselves and others accountable for their actions. Now, this is true for when things go well, but it is particularly true for when things go wrong. And I believe that accountability is modeled by a good leader. A culture of accountability needs to be built up in an organization. So when the rank and file in an organization sees somebody in leadership taking responsibility for, particularly when something has gone wrong, then they learn that mistakes happen and that there is a lesson or lessons to be learned. Of course, this is contingent upon people not continuing to make the same mistakes over and over, because that's not a lesson to be learned, that's just sloppiness. What this does, taking responsibility, is it avoids the blame games. I absolutely abhor blame games. It's the one thing I shut down as fast as I possibly can when it arises. Now, taken together, the first and the second principle, that of respect and accountability, properly practiced, can naturally create the conditions for the third principle, which is that of justice. For instance, where junior staff do not feel their rights are trampled upon by seniors with more privilege, and where there is freedom for people to speak up and have their contributions recognized and affirmed. For me, justice is also the means by which leaders build equity and inclusion, particularly in the decision-making process. Because when people feel heard and they feel part of the processes that affect their lives, they are more likely to take accountability for their actions. It is also the means, in my view, to create work environments that encourage a sense of collaboration instead of competition, and a sense of belonging in an entity or across teams. The fourth principle is that of service. I absolutely believe in the notion of servant leadership, a term I think which was coined by Greenleaf. Now, servant leaders are not servile. They are not obsequious, nor are they submissive, but they do serve. They serve their organizations, they serve their clients, they serve their employees, and they serve society. And I always ask myself this question: if I cannot trace the why, the what, and the how of my leadership work in service of various constituencies, then can I really call myself a leader? In my disciplinary field as Dean of an Education faculty, I need to bear in mind that I serve the academic project first and foremost. Within that, I serve our students. I serve the staff and their trajectories and their pathways to promotion. I serve the university mission, and most of all, my work as a leader is in service of society. And because people like me work in education, we often need reminders that we are producing teachers and leaders for our education system. And in doing so, we are shaping a nation through the people we graduate. So we better do a good job. The next principle is that of honesty. Well, this is a hard one in some ways for me. Honesty can be tricky to get right as a leader because what I may see as an honest view or honest feedback can often come across as tactlessness. It can come across as harshness. And I really struggle with this aspect of leadership. I have had to learn that sometimes what I want to say honestly in feedback needs to be couched in a way that still gets the message across, but does it in a way that takes into consideration who the receiver is, how they deal with feedback, what kind of day they are having, what is impacting on their lives at a certain time. And this implies a sense of humanity as a leader. And for someone like me, who's very goal-oriented and who prioritizes reaching particular milestones, objectives, this is very hard. And it's a constant learning journey for me to learn how to be honest without offending anybody in the process. But this is also why it's important as a leader to really know your team members well. You also need to know who you can call on as close confidants. Perhaps talk over your honest discussion so they can hear how it may be received. And sometimes that helps me particularly to tone down what I may say in order to get the best out of the staff member. It helps me to serve others fairly. And it helps me to communicate with clarity and certainty about issues without alienating people in the process. I recently had to have a meeting with senior staff in my organization about not meeting some funding targets. And this was not a pleasant conversation. Some staff were naturally unhappy about the message I was giving them. But it was my responsibility. And so to do that, I had to show them the data and unpack it in a way that conveys a clear message about what we are not doing, and also to lead a conversation about actions that need to be taken to address the situation, and of course, the support that needs to be provided in order to enact those strategies that we discussed. Now, if I think about myself as a leader, I think that ethical leadership for me is deeply tied to personal values. I believe that integrity as a leader cannot be separated from who you are as a person. And so I'm going to use this principle of honesty in providing all of you with an example. When I think of honesty, I immediately think of money and other resources and how they are leveraged. And perhaps the best way for me to explain this is to use the lessons I learned from my dad. My dad was a teacher and he was an educational leader. He was a head of department. And so he worked with the school finances, someone else's money. He performed a similar function for our church, managed their finances. And he instilled in my younger brother and I that you have to treat other people's money with care and integrity. And what he meant by that, he said, do not use or misuse money that does not belong to you. And I suppose it could apply to any other resource that is available in an organization. Now, this grounding, these values, and the lessons we learned from my dad are at the foundation of who we both are today as leaders in our respective fields. And actually, probably these lessons serve us well because we are both custodians or caretakers of millions of rands of other people's money. So rest assured, I will not be misusing money as an educational leader because it's not my money. Which really brings us to the heart of today's discussion: ethical leadership in education. For me, this is not even an option. Ethical leadership is foundational to the creation of trust, of fairness, and most importantly, of transformation in our institutions as we do the work of preparing professionals. I particularly like the following quote by Lee Shulman. He said, professionals not only have to understand and perform, they have to be certain kinds of human beings. So to use the language of the education of clergy, they have to undergo a certain kind of formation of character and values so that they become the kind of person to whom we are prepared to entrust the responsibilities of our health system, of our education system, of our souls, and of the kind of justice we expect to see pursued in this society. Ethical leadership for me in education has to have a transformational slant. So we not only lead and manage in education, but we engage in activities to transform educational spaces and systems. Ethical leadership in education is thus about caring for the common good and making decisions that execute on this mandate, not for individual glory or prominence or for covering up abuses of power. Now, in order to work for the common good, one must care, and one must care enough to act. I particularly love the work of Nell Noddings, who writes about care. And she said, when we see the other's reality as a possibility for us, we must act to eliminate the intolerable, to reduce the pain, to fill the need, to actualize the dream. When I am in this sort of relationship with another, when the other's reality becomes a real possibility for me, I care. Caring thus for me is at the heart of transformational leadership. It is a call to action. It is about taking a stance, often in opposition to the dominant views. It is about leadership that looks beyond today, beyond the here and now. It asks us to answer the question of how the strategy, goals, and decisions we set today will impact future generations. It is actually about caring enough to take on the stewardship of education and the promotion of education for sustainability. But I'm also aware in advocating for this stance that it takes courage, tremendous courage to speak up. We have seen the consequences of what happens when ethical people speak up against corruption. They get murdered brazenly, often execution style, in a hail of bullets. And even when corrupt people in leadership do get caught out with evidence, they either blame somebody else or flatly deny it. And although I'm using our South African leadership as an example of what has gone so horribly wrong in this sphere, it's also an international leadership issue. We see bullying and intimidation by international leaders, some of whom respond with a rallying cry, fake news, when they want to shut down a critic's comments. In my own field, I want to reference a series of recent conversations about what happens when those in leadership do not act and act decisively and timeously. We've all recently seen the news reports of teaching positions for sale. Young graduates being asked to pay somebody in leadership. And I want to stress this, pay somebody in leadership, usually in a district, in a department of education, or at a school to get a position as a teacher. I've been hearing these rumors of these stories for more than 10 years. If I've been hearing it, then trust me, so has everybody else. And it's worrisome that not much has been done about it. But it was only when a group of us worked on a research project in this year, where we were tracing our graduates from 2024 to see how they had transitioned into the school environment and whether or not we as a university had prepared them well, that these stories suddenly became real for us. They became stories with evidence. Many of the unemployed graduates we spoke to from 2024 talked about either themselves or others being asked to pay for a job as a teacher, and varying amounts, 15,000 Rand, 25,000 Rand, 40,000 Rand. Some from school principals, some from other people in leadership positions at schools, some from district education officials. All people in leadership positions. One of our graduates even went on record with a reporter saying that she had paid a school principal for a job in Soweto and that the school principal had progressed to sexually harassing her, demanding sex in exchange for her keeping her job. More recently this week, I heard on the radio of an 8-year-old repeatedly being raped by a school principal over a 12-month period. Now, my response to these kinds of reports about the behavior of leaders in education is purely and simply utter disgust. There's no polite way to say this. I am utterly disgusted. I am disgusted that people like these stand side by side with me and other leaders, and that their conduct and mine is considered to be on the same level. Because actually, I completely distance myself as an educational leader from people like these. Education is about taking on a sacrosanct role of care for our children and for our young people. To deny this responsibility through our actions, such as those I've described, is simply reprehensible. And I actually have to ask, where are the leaders or the superiors of such people in all of this. I know from my own environment, what scares me the most is the attitude from some leaders that we should not speak up when we see something wrong. I often hear people saying it's against our culture to expose people because they have a job to protect and families to support. But what about the institutions we are letting down? What about the people whose interests are not served by us being quiet and not speaking up? As an educational leader, I believe that I am compelled to speak up, and it is my responsibility to encourage others to do the same. When they know that our children, our young people, and any others in society are being exploited and victimized. Because if you can't call yourself an educational leader, if you do not have the courage to speak up. And so I want to address one other thing. And I'm smiling now because I'm sometimes amused by this, even though I know it is not a laughing matter. People often try to discredit me as a woman leader when I address issues that I deem unfair. I don't know about some of you, other women leaders out there, but I've been called overly emotional. I've been called over caring and overreactor. I've been called irrational, and I've been called disruptive. And I say to people, and I'm saying it to you now, what is wrong with caring as part of leadership? What is wrong with emotion showing itself up in leadership? What is wrong with being disruptive if what you are disrupting is an oppressive status quo? The status quo usually only works for a few people anyways. And the minute you disrupt that, that's when people start calling you names. For me, this is not just about being a woman leader. It is about practicing transformational leadership, which is fundamentally about disruption. It is about prompting change. It is about shifting things that no longer work and no longer serve the greatest good. And if this means that I am described as a disruptive leader, I'm fine with that. I will own the title. But as I conclude, I would like us to think about how the age of AI and technology feature in educational leadership, feature in ethics, feature in transformational leadership. Because AI and technology will introduce new dilemmas and challenges into our spaces. And here I go back to the values of care and social justice. Because if we pay sufficient attention to the values of care and social justice as leaders, and use those to inform our actions and our practices, and we lead with and model these in our behaviors, I'm of the view that this will influence the sense of trust, the collaboration, the innovation, and the resilience of staff in our entities. Because believe me, artificial intelligence and automation will create gaps in society, and it may even deepen the divide between those who have and those who do not have. So, as leaders, as educational transformative leaders, we need to lead for innovation that is both socially and economically embedded. And our leadership needs to provide the models for people to work together and stand together in times of uncertainty. Ultimately, ethical and transformational leadership is not a fixed state or a skill learned once off. It is a journey of inspiration. It is a journey of continuous learning. It is a journey of reflection and reorientation. It is about living and reliving and changing. It is about living the values we espouse. I thus wish you well in your deliberations and hope that by the end of the discussions, all of us will be able to move forward with a shared commitment to lead with authenticity and integrity, to lead in a way that's grounded in solid values that are oriented towards justice and transformation. I want to end by saying doing the right thing is not always easy, but it is always worth it. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us, the time is always right to do what is right. I thank you, and I hope that you have interesting and transformative discussions around ethical leadership in education.
Wow, that certainly sets a very real tone for the conversation that started yesterday. But I think here, this conversation walks away from the textbooks. It walks away from, the theories on what we should be doing, but dives directly into the heart of praxis and the kind of dilemmas and the kind of issues that face leadership on the ground, in the field, in the work of doing leadership. I know that there are many, many aspects here that resonated with people. I also know that you have maybe a number of questions and a number of things that you have personally experienced, which obviously also contributes. Please, colleagues, use the chat space. I'm really very saddened that Prof. Peterson is not here to take on some of the questions that you might actually have for her. But certainly, I think that she has made the conversation very real. And for us, that is the part that is most effective. We are required and called upon to take into cognizance many of the things that happen in our surrounds, and how we deal with that then becomes the point by which we need to start deliberating. Because I think that, as we also heard from Mr. Baloy yesterday, wearing different hats as leaders, finding yourself in different circumstances and in different companies and with different contending ideas, your accountability is beyond just doing the right thing. And as Professor Peterson has pointed out so eloquently, it's also about how it is that you give feedback. It's also how you role model some of the things that you believe in. But particularly, she picked on the issue of women leaders, and sometimes how sometimes being courageous can also, devolve into name calling and so forth. So she definitely left us with a lot to think about. And I really wish that you would share your thoughts, your ideas, your comments, things that you are thinking about in the chat space as we proceed forward. And with that, I hand over now to Dion, who will take over the facilitation from here. Dion, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Before we dive into the book review, I think it is important that we hear from our participants. And so, Prof, with your permission, could the interactive poll please be put up so that we can take a moment just to respond to the Mentimeter poll. And so that we also can just have a feel about who's in the room and what they're thinking about.
So colleagues, I think Dion is saying that the Mentimeter QR code, as well as the link, what is on the screen now, but it's also in the chat. Please participate in that. We'd love to hear from you.
I will just give an opportunity and some time for participants to scan the code and perhaps navigate towards the chat box where you can find the link. We would really appreciate your engagement. Just a quick interactive session just to help us understand who's in the room and what you're bringing to the conversation today. And as you engage and interact with the interactive poll, I just want to perhaps ask Prof. Bonang Mohale to prepare himself. But I also want to remind all participants, if you are on other social platforms, to please perhaps tag at Kagiso_trust, as well as at GoToUJ, and perhaps use the hashtag education conversation on your social media platforms. Let's keep the learning going beyond the Zoom room that we are in today. We will come back to the Mentimeter. Next, we are joined by Prof. Bonang Mohale. Prof. Bonang Mohale, if you can put up your slides and just prepare yourself for engagement as I introduce you.
Just to confirm that there'll be no slides, it's supposed to be just a conversation.
Oh, yes, it's a conversation. It's a book review. It's an interview. I do apologize. Let me introduce you, Prof. So Prof. Bonang Mohale is a Chancellor of the University of the Free State and also a chair of multiple companies and the author of 2 best-selling books. Prof. Bonang has received multiple awards for leadership and ethics, including the African Union's Lifetime Achievement Award. He was listed among the 100 most reputable Africans in 2023. Now, this conversation is about what it means to lead with both courage and consciousness in education, in business, and in life. And so I'm going to give over to Prof. Kat, who will facilitate the book review interview with Prof. Bonang Mohale.
Thank you very much, Dion. And Prof. Mohale, what an amazing honor to be able to converse with you this afternoon. Welcome to our space, and thank you so much for making yourself available to talk about your book. This is something new for our conference. We haven't done it before in this kind of way, but this is the book that we are going to be talking about today. And in particular, I'm not sure if you can see the book. No, I don't think it's visible through the screen. Perhaps we will take a photo and put it onto the chat. But the title of the book that we are going to be reviewing today is Behold the Turtle, Thoughts of Ethically Principled Leadership, that you wrote. And it has been quite an engaging book. And in fact, to be quite frank with you, Prof, I first came across your book just at around the time that we were preparing for this conference. And so it came through the universe at a very opportune time. So Prof. Mohale, from the title itself, Behold the Turtle, that's already a play on a metaphor. That's already something that is stimulating our thinking. And so if I think about Behold the Turtle, it really challenges us to think deeply about ethical leadership and what you call in the book the better normal. So we are very aware of the new normal, but you have switched into thinking through the book into us thinking about a better normal. And I really love that twist, that change in thinking that you have introduced. So for education leaders navigating complex pressures, and your glorious biography tell us that you have found yourself in numerous spaces of leadership. And so you come not just with what you have shared in the book, which by the way is very conversational in nature. The book itself is a beautiful read. And I just want to tell you, it's not an academic read, it's a very beautiful conversational read. So makes it very real, like Prof. Nadine has done for us in terms of her conversation this afternoon. So I really want to explore, this issue of integrity, accountability, and legacy through the lens of your turtle metaphor. So my first question to you is, why the turtle? What drew you to the image of the turtle as the guiding metaphor for this book that deals with leading ethically?
Is it okay if I just say Cat instead of Professor Cat?
Please, yes, I would love that.
So, Behold the Turtle, it's an African adage. It's a second book that has an African adage. In full, it says, Behold the turtle, comma, he only makes progress when his neck is stuck out. I'll come back to that. The first one, which was launched on Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2018, its title says, Lift as you rise, another African adage. Because I'm talking to family here, I can also confirm that on Monday, the 10th of November this year, I'll be launching my third book, which has an African adage coming in from the code, an autobiography. Why an autobiography? Because I thought, look, I'm a manager. I'm a businessman. I'm not an author, but I'll only start referring to myself as an author maybe after I've written my third book. And the third book comes in November. So up until then, you can't refer to me as an author because I've only written two, thank God to people like you, Kat. Both of them are in the top 10 bestseller list. I could have chosen William Wordsworth. I could have chosen Shakespeare. But the voice that needs to be amplified, paleted, highlighted, and celebrated is an African voice. The voice that has been othered, that has been excluded, is an African voice. The continent that needs to rise up, not only in words, but in deeds, is an African continent, because isn't it amazing that 31 years into democracy, poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face? Put differently, if wealth is the inevitable outcome of both hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa should be a dollar billionaire. Let me end by saying, if this is your land, where are your stories? These profoundly simple but authentically gravid with meaning words are the title of his first book, Professor Emeritus J. Edwards Chamberlain. He was talking about finding the middle ground. Because if we don't tell our stories, like I do in writing Behold the Turtle, it is possible that somebody might tell our story in a manner that we may not like. So if we don't think for ourselves, we place our future in the hands of others. It is up to us to create our own new world. My grandmother says, until and unless lions have their own storytellers, stories about hunting will always glorify the hunter, not the lion. Today, 31 years into democracy, the story of Isandlwana is being told by white male Afrikaners, not by the people who participated in that war, not by the grandchildren of Senzangakhona, of Me Nandi, of Dingizwayo, of King Ushaka. They are being told by others. That's why we'll always be sucking the hind teeth. Kat?
No, I think this is an amazing beginning because I had an inclination that the turtle came from an African philosophical space and that there must have been some reason why that became forefronted. And that's the reason why it attracted me. And in fact, I'm not surprised that this book is on the top 10 bestseller because certainly the title itself, for the people who, people choose books differently. And the one very common way of choosing a book is looking at the title, apart from what the front cover looks like. So I think that title is extremely, extremely well thought through, and I really appreciate you, for using it. And if you say, Prof, that you are only a writer after your third novel, a lot of us have lots of catching up to do, I can assure you. My second question, you remind us that a turtle only makes progress when it sticks its neck out. In leadership, this often means the sticking of neck out means challenging corruption, resisting groupthink, or standing for a particular principle. Now, particularly for education leaders, and as Professor Peterson so rightly pointed out, under so much of pressure, what risks must they be prepared to face if they are truly committed to ethical leadership? And this is the tough one because this is what makes people hold back. This is what lets the status quo go forward, because disrupting this is when the problem actually starts. So what risks must people be courageous enough to take on?
You know, nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. But imagine for a moment that the turtle, when it's inside its hard shell, its cocoon, it's warm, it's safe, it's secure, but it goes nowhere fast. If it wants to move from point A to point B, at some stage, it has to stick its neck out. And if it does that, it is possible that the bird of prey might be hovering above and plucks its soft head and has it for lunch. That's always the risk. For the turtle to move forward in space and in time, it risks losing it all. What about you and I? That all we have to do is to speak truth to power. The worst that can happen to us is that we might lose our job. The worst that might happen to us is that maybe we might not get that promotion that we were due in South Africa in this time, in this country, when so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail. Professor Peterson reminds us that unfortunately, if you speak out, you are a whistleblower, you might actually have your brains blown off. Because we have seen not just ordinary Tom, Dick, and Sithole being killed for being whistleblowers, but members of the judiciary, lawyers in liquidation and business rescue, these practitioners, these professionals, those are the ones that are dying. So you can see it's a risky thing. But two last things. One, leadership, by definition, presupposes followership. You can't just lead yourself. Although the first principle of leadership is you should be able to lead self. The second, it says you need to lead in such a way that those that are watching you want to follow you. Not because you've got positional power, because they think that you have been able to articulate in such a manner that they can vividly see that the tomorrow you are painting on a composite basis is substantially better than the today that they have today. The same way that the people of this continent in Africa, 1.4 billion of us, 55 countries that speak more than 3,000 languages, some of them risk it all to cross the Mediterranean in a dinky, in a rickety dinky, to go to Europe, because where they are living, to go to, it's better than the hell that they're leaving behind. Therefore, to them, death is better than the leaders that they themselves have chosen. That's why I think for you to look at yourself in the mirror and refer to yourself as a leader, not just of self, but of others, number one, it needs some sort of a compelling vision. But number two, it needs courage. Courage of your convictions to speak truth to power, irrespective of the consequences. Lastly, this is the third one, it needs integrity. This is the one that is less sexy to talk about. Because integrity means you are just brought up well. You don't take things that don't belong to you. That if you are in the sand pit, you play in such a manner that you give others an opportunity also to play. It also means that you are not self, but the other-centered. It's like pretty much being in love. Because if you love somebody, you want to make them happy, because if you succeed, it comes back to you tenfold. There's not a single person that I know who's in love with another person, who's selfish, self-centered, and egocentric. In fact, my grandmother says, this thing called love is seeing yourself in another. Thanks, Kat.
Beautiful. I think you like hit the nail on the head, because yesterday also we had that conversation about knowing and doing and the gap that exists between it. So Cynthia Skuman from the Ethics Monitor showed us a beautiful cartoon where we know what's the right thing to do, but there's a chasm or a gap between that and actually doing the right thing. So she called it the knowing doing gap. And I think this is a perfect example of the kind of leadership that's needed in all spheres, not just in South Africa, but across the globe, where when you know what is the right thing to do, then you cross the chasm in this courage, as you speak of, and risk everything, irrespective of what, because integrity should stand tall. But this is where fear comes in. Fear of consequences, fear of reprisals. So what would you advise that leaders do? Because the one thing that Prof also mentioned is when you want to point out people's mistakes, you can't just go and tell them that they're doing everything wrong and just use a very untactful way to say it. So how do you think leadership should prepare for being able to give the talk, the truth to power, picking up these courageous conversations? What in your experience are the ways in which people can, or leaders can, be sensitive so that they speak what needs to be spoken, but that the message on the other side is not taken as antagonism, it's not taken as an attack, it's taken with the spirit that this is the wrong thing to do, you are having to be accountable, but then the way you say it gets you to the right action rather than topples the apple cart, basically.
But I think you have hit the nail on the head. Would I say I have a friend who, when I go with on Friday evening to the club, we drink ourselves paralytic, we chase women, we don't come back home, we come back home on Sunday morning, stumbling into our homes and find an excuse as to where we spent the weekend, and the friend says nothing. Because there's an African adage that says, a friend is the one that tells you when you are wrong, and still stand by your side. Therefore, leadership says, is it possible for me to palette, highlight, and celebrate in public, but to chastise in private? Because all of us are human, and we don't want to be publicly embarrassed. But if I look you in the centerpiece of the pupils of your eyes and say, you know, I saw you yesterday do this, and I thought that's not the agreed way of doing things. I'm in your office, the door is closed. Could you walk me through what happened? And I genuinely listen. Because you might just give a response that blows my mind. And yet I came here to really chastise. Having listened, I then said, okay, now I understand. But remember, the agreed way of working is here. Your behavior was here. Therefore, there's a disconnect. There's a disjuncture. What are we going to do tomorrow? The third part says, of course, we are imperfect by design. We're not working with robots or bots. We're working with human beings. Therefore, accept that we learn more from those things that we don't get right the first time than from those that you do. Therefore, making a mistake is part and parcel of growing up. It's like getting thirsty and hungry or desiring somebody. It's all normal processes. Therefore, failing is normal. Getting things wrong is normal. In fact, if you don't fall off a bicycle, you'll never learn how to ride a bicycle. If you don't fall off a horse once, you'll never know how to ride a horse. Put differently, it is rough seas that a good sailor makes. Because everybody in calm waters of the Mediterranean, where everything is smooth and it's calm, and your job is just maintenance, not transformation that Professor Peterson spoke about. Everybody can be a leader. In fact, if it was easy, everyone would do it. It is the hard in it that makes it great. So this notion of leadership must be taken so serious for two reasons. One, because it is a privilege to improve the quality of lives of the majority of our people. Secondly, it is not an opportunity for self-enrichment. That's why our political leaders, we call them public servants. The definition is in the words. One, it says public, not me, myself, I. It means I'm happy to drive an Uno or a Toyota Tez because I chose to be a public servant. If I wanted to drive a Bentley, I would call myself Elon Musk or Patrice Motsepe. But that's not what I chose. I didn't choose entrepreneurship. I chose public. The last word says to serve. Leaders are not there to bellow instructions. Even if you are the MD of an organization and you have a driver whose job it is to drive you around, can you find it possible to ask to be moved from point A to point B rather than instruct to be taken from point A to point B? Because 90% of conflict, it's not caused by the content. It's caused by the how you speak to people, how you address them. Only 10% is the content. Therefore, is it possible to fire somebody that you caught stealing from you red-handed? As they pack their things to leave, they say, I did something I shouldn't have done. I've read the employee manual. Oh, where is my next fixed source of income going to come from next month? And have that anxiety, but still say, damn, I was treated with respect. That's why values are absolutely key. Kat?
Wow. I think taking the humanity into account is so very integral to leadership, as you so rightly point out. Prof, in your book, you highlight that too often accountability is reduced to reports and compliance checklists. Now, for education leaders managing institutions, what does real accountability look like in practice? What do you think? I mean, we know it's in the reports. We know that people get audited in the finances and whatever it is. But I think it's more than that. There is like a kind of a role modeling that also has to preface this. So what does accountability actually look like in practice?
So maybe let me call it final accountability. To say the buck stops with you, not anybody else. Have you ever been to a meeting where there's 8 of you and there are 1 or 2 people that are making comments, not to move the meeting upwards and forwards in space and in time, but just to sound clever? So for me, the notion of accountability has more to do with the impact rather than the process. Is it possible that the 2 of us, let alone the 8 of us in a room, can together accomplish that which on my own will take me inordinately long? That's all there is to it. Can we move the dial much further, faster, higher by working together? Professor Peterson calls it collaborating rather than competing, than I would do on my own. If that's the measure, then the traffic lights, the reports become insignificant because we are indeed making progress. The measure must be the impact. As a leader, can you look back and say, imagine if you are the reason why somebody feels noticed, seen, and heard, loved, respected, and supported, and you are the reason why they feel that way. Then you've accomplished something. That you are late for your report, it was supposed to come on Friday, 2 o'clock, and it came at 16 hours. Actually, it's immaterial in the broader scheme of things. Therefore, we should be the habit of asking ourselves when we get to the meeting to say, for what purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? Not just to go through the motions and say the hour, it's gone. To do what? If we can answer that and we achieve it in 10 minutes, the meeting is achieved. That's why the agenda of the meeting, 27 items, it doesn't matter if you can only achieve 3 things. Can you discuss? Because that's how you make a choice. You must have a number of options. The second, you say to yourself, can we decide? Because there's no use just talking for talking's sake. You must land at a decision. In business, we call it resolve, hence resolution. We have taken the resolution. To do what? To do. Today, Africa is poor, not because our African leaders speak bad English compared to the President of the United States 2.0. No. They are poor because we don't do the doing. The talking is magnificent. We talk a good talk, but the doing, we don't. That's why it amounts to nothing. Therefore, a meeting is effective and efficient. It is successful if we have done the discussion, we took the decision, and we did the implementation, which is the doing. If you can do that, the meeting is complete. That should be the only measure. Let me put it differently as I end. The reason why South Africa is called a democracy, it's because in 1912 we were excluded from the Union of South Africa. In 1910, we couldn't vote as Africans. 27th of June 1955, we met again in Kliptown, and we came up with the Freedom Charter with 10 principles. 27th of April, when we became free, 1994, we voted and were gifted with Mandela. When you look at those 3 documents, the founding of the ANC, the Freedom Charter, the 9th principle says, and the land shall belong to those who work it. The 8th says, and the doors of learning shall be open. Not to those who have money, just it shall be open to all. And you look at why we say our constitution is the best in the world. All of them talk about just 2 things. On the one hand, can we work together, all of us, to improve the quality of life of the majority of our people? Number 2, to have a better life for all, not just for elected officials. That's all. That's the measure. But we look back at the results. We've been free for 31 years, 30 of which the ANC-led government had an absolute and unfettered majority. This last year, they are now in a coalition with the Democratic Alliance. The question we need to ask ourselves is, what is it that the ANC can achieve in a coalition with the DA that on their own, with a 2/3 majority, a 75% majority during Thabo Mbeki's presidency, because it was 74.9%, they couldn't do on their own? That's the only measure. Not how many imbizos they've had, not how many National Working Committee meetings they've had, not how much money they've spent. In fact, the scorecard is very clear. It says in the 30 years that we've been free, the only people that made money are the Jewish people, the Afrikaner people, and the Muslim people, because they've got capital. Everybody else, myself included, have become poorer. Therefore, by that measure, the 31 years of ANC rule has plunged their own people into the self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty. Let me close with this one line, Kat. The pain inflicted by your own or your own stings more. Kat?
Wow. Wow. Honestly, Prof, we can certainly spend the entire rest of the time of this conference talking about your book. It has such an amazing insight into this very topic. But I do want to leave this conversation with two things. The one is that the turtle is slow but steady. They also live long lives, symbolizing endurance and continuity. And in education, where we make decisions today, we have to recognize that those decisions impact and have a ripple effect on many, many lives into the future. And the idea of leading with integrity and with ethics should be at the forefront before anything else, for the reason that it impacts generations to come. Prof. Mohale, Behold the Turtle, Thoughts of Ethically Principled Leadership, an amazing read. And now I make the announcement for everybody in the room. We have 5 of your books to give away to 5 lucky audience members who can then read into many of the, or more depth into the conversation that we just had. That was just an hors d'oeuvre. It was just a tip of the iceberg. There is tons of questions and comments in the chat, Prof. So you've really lit the room. And I really want to thank you for taking the time from your very, very busy schedule to be with us and to engage us. It has been a fascinating engagement with you, and your follow-up, even though you did not hear Prof. Peterson, was a good follow-up from that conversation. Have an amazing day. Stay blessed. Stay with us as long as you like. Please engage, also in the chat with the audience. But for the audience member, we're going to be announcing the 5 lucky winners of your books towards the end of the conference, and we hope that you're in the room to receive these. Take care, everybody, and over to you, Dion, and thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mohale and Prof. Kat. Just to emphasize again what Prof. Kat has said, there will be 5 copies of Prof. Mohale's book that will be given away by a lucky draw. But here's the catch, right? Winners will be announced at the end, as Prof. Kat has indicated, and you must be present when your name is announced to receive the book. If you are not present, you will miss out. So please also note that all the winners will also be contacted via email for delivery of the book. So going over to our next speaker this afternoon, Dr. Tony Shabangu. As I prepare to introduce Dr. Tony Shabangu, I'm going to ask him to perhaps, if he is sharing any slides, to perhaps load up the slides. And so let me introduce Dr. Tony Shabangu. Dr. Tony Shabangu is a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg in the Department of Philosophy, and has also worked as a research writing consultant and coordinator at the postgraduate school. He brings us into the world of ethics and Ubuntu, exploring what it means to lead justly and how African moral philosophy can guide leadership in education today. Now, this is a call to lead with humanity, humility, and healing at the center. Dr. Tony Shabangu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dion, for that wonderful introduction. As you were speaking, I was wondering, because I actually prepared 2 slightly different presentations. One was more focused on academic, ethics in the academic space, and the other was more in line with leadership ethics. I wasn't sure what would be preferred by the audience, but I guess I went with what was just introduced now. So can you see my screen? Is everything visible on your end?
Yes, it is, Doc. You can go
Perfect.
ahead.
Okay, so my talk today will be focused primarily on talking about leadership ethics in light of Ubuntu, which is a moral philosophical theory that is used in philosophy and actually in many other spaces. If you have maybe ever had a look at our Constitution or the preamble to the Constitution, this is a word that you may have picked up really early. If you're old enough to remember the CRC, you will also remember Ubuntu was quite the guiding principle. So what I will do today is briefly give you a background on, what I think is ethical leadership, and then I will give it a spin, an Ubuntu spin, to see if we cannot maybe introduce an indigenous kind of way of looking at ethical leadership and just being an ethical person in the society and the community that you find yourself in. So, because I'm a philosopher, I like defining things, just to be clear exactly what I'm talking about and how these concepts connect. So, the very first thing, I'm sure you guys have had a lot of this already, but I'm going to briefly just talk about it. Morality and law. Morality refers to principles, standards, rules, and theories about the good. So this is what you get referred to in society if you're someone who's helpful, if you're someone who's supportive, who's a part of society, and you promote harmony. And then there's also the law, and they differ. The law and morality differ because the laws are enforced by the state, and it's not simply just social approval, but it's something that comes with the legal aspects to it. So there is a distinction when people talk about morality and when they talk about law. When we judge someone to be immoral, it's something that we do as society, it's societal disapproval. But when something is illegal, it actually affects the legal system, and there are sanctions that are followed by an illegal action. And then we do have gray areas in which legal and moral cross, and this is something that we see in a variety of spaces, and this is exactly where being ethical comes in, where the boundary of the moral and the boundary of the legal start becoming a little blurry. So ethics is the study of morally right behaviors and characters. It's usually a collection of principles or standards of expected human conduct that govern behaviors and guide decision making. And this is something that we find, it's based on, or rather, is usually built on a moral basis, and then it's formalized. So the difference between morality and ethics in this case is that what you will get as moral disapproval, ethics will actually provide a framework and provide pretty much the options you have and the sanctions that follow certain actions and behaviors. So the ethics may not necessarily be legal in that you'll go to jail for doing something, but there will be consequences that are material, quite material, for any ethical errors or things that one may do. So, to move on now, leadership is defined as any behavior that influences actions and attitudes of followers. As Prof just mentioned, there are no leaders without followers, and it's something that is always hand in hand. So I always imagine leadership as something essentially grounded by community. This is important as it will come up again later in my talk. More on ethical leadership is a form of leadership which individuals demonstrate conduct for the common good that is acceptable and appropriate in every area of their life. It is composed of the following three major ethical traits. I'm not going to go through all the ethical traits because I had to cut this down into a very short presentation. But I think for any ethical leader, they have to be able to show the benefits of these kind of benefits in the spaces that they occupy. They need to be a positive culture that comes with an ethical leader. So an ethical leader is someone who promotes a certain way in which people can can find support, and they can actually find that they identify, the followers identify with the ethical leader to some degree. The ethical leader is someone who should prevent scandals and they should be loyal to not just their employees and followers, but the institutions and the spaces that they find themselves in. This is a tough part for an ethical leader because they have to manage the expectations of the community they belong to, along with any sort of institutional expectations. So, for instance, if you find yourself working for the government per se, you always have limitations in what you can do because there are expectations from the ground up, from society saying we need these things, we don't have these provisions, services are lacking. And then there's also pressure from the top down saying we are limited in funding, we can't support all of these people, we can't do all of it. So an ethical leader is essentially someone who balances this also and ensures that they are able to satisfy everyone, which is a tough job. And then they also improve the emotional well-being of those around them.
Dr.
But
Tony, could you please put your slides on presentation mode? Thank you.
oh, sorry, are they not changing?
They are
Apology.
changing, but it's not in presentation mode. So some of
Can
the
you see it in
participants
presentation
are
mode
finding it
now?
difficult to see. It is in presentation mode. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So there are downsides to leadership that is poor, especially people who find themselves in these positions, but they haven't worked themselves morally or even ethically to the point of leading other people. There's destructive leaders, there are susceptible followers, and there are conducive environments. And this can actually destabilize an entire community where the leaders are personalized in their desire for power, they are narcissistic, they have negative life themes, and they usually have ideologies that promote hate for others. And then, obviously, if they are susceptible followers and destructive leaders, we eventually have what is called a cult, where the leader can mold the people into whatever they want because they are usually conformists. They are usually people with low self-evaluations of themselves, low maturity. So they are very susceptible to suggestion from these destructive leaders. And there are also environments that actually bring about more discord. And these are unstable environments where there's any sort of perceived threat. Both the leaders and the followers eventually see each other as threats, where there are clash in cultural values, and the leader doesn't do anything to kind of make sense of these clashing epistemologies. And then there's also lacks of checks and balances, an ineffective institution. So it's important to have ethical leaders because when we don't, one of these situations, whether it's the susceptible followers or the conducive environments, can actually collapse the entire system. And the ethical leader is able to actually pull these things together, even if they look like this, if they are susceptible followers and environments that are not conducive, the ethical leader can still make sense of it. But if there's a destructive leader, then this is a continuous cycle that does not actually stop. And now, quickly, just to speak about Ubuntu, I'm trying to be mindful of time. Sorry that I'm rushing through this, but Ubuntu gets used in a variety of ways, and from just general understanding, Ubuntu is an ethical theory that I make use of, but it's not initially seen as an ethical theory. It's rather known to be a moral philosophical approach, and then it becomes developed into a lived ethic, and we learn various morals from this, especially in line with personhood and community. Now, Ubuntu, as a moral philosophical approach, focuses on the prescriptive elements of the theory and less of the descriptive and religious aspects, even though these are still important, just so that we are all on a base level. I try to kind of make it very much prescribe an ethical way, what sort of actions, what sort of behaviors would be accompanied with Ubuntu. So that's my focus here, to kind of look at how we can use Ubuntu to cash out harmonious communal relationships, or even those that are cohesive with others. The point is to establish that the leader and the community are essentially persons, and they all have certain roles to play. And even when one is in a community as a leader, they cannot be a leader in isolation of the community. It is always encapsulated in relationship with others. I try to contrast Ubuntu with some of the famous ethical theories that are found in the West, one being utilitarianism, which focuses on pleasure and satisfaction. And I say Ubuntu is not about that. It's not about simply satisfying the greatest group of people, but rather it's important that even individuals in a community with Ubuntu are recognized. Ubuntu doesn't use one brush stroke to paint everyone, but individuality is still very important in a community with Ubuntu. And a person is more than just a thinking thing, a rational being, but the person is understood to be relational. We are people because we relate to other people. We are not people because we are smart or we are thinking things in the world of animals and vegetation, but rather because we can relate to one another in a very unique way. We relate to our environments in a very unique way. And also the concept of self-realization is still captured by Ubuntu. So by committing ourselves to Ubuntu, we are not saying that we must all now be one thing and all the same, and we must be, no individuals. But instead, I'm saying that within a community of Ubuntu, self-realization is still something that is valued highly, but it happens in the context of the community. Now, there are a number of perspectives of Ubuntu, mainly Tutu, which you may have heard of. There's also a scholar called Domoko Manda, and Augustine Schut. They all kind of give some sort of description, trying to explain what sort of actions and behaviors are suited to Ubuntu. And it all generates this kind of very positive, supportive, kind of collaborative space in which people see each other in this way. But in this talk, I can't use any of these because these are very, very descriptive and give very specific values that one should have for them to be considered to have Ubuntu. And I want to look at some sort of more general understanding to say that in a community that has any form of harmony, we can attribute Ubuntu to that. And Metz comes up with that kind of explanation. Metz says community or harmony is the combination of solidarity and identity. And wherever we have community or harmony, we have Ubuntu. And for him, solidarity is moral obligation to be concerned for the good of others. So it's not simply looking at, whether or not I'm a leader and I've been given this position to, get resources or guide other people, but do I have this level of concern for the good of others? Am I happy when they are happy? Do I get diminished when they are diminished? Do I share in whatever struggles, whatever successes that my community finds themselves in? And the second aspect is to identify with each other. We need to be able to see those around us as we, as part of a we. We need to be able to not only see them as a part of a we, but to imagine that we have shared goals. As academics, we have shared goals to improve the state of our institution, to improve the state of our society. As people at a leadership conference, we are here all to improve what we understand about ethics and about leadership and become better. So we are a community and we have a shared identity in that case. So one always finds themselves in one community or another. Whether or not you are at home with your family or outside of that, you are always entrenched in a community or another. So these kind of values speak across the board. And from an Ubuntu perspective, leadership is never about individual power, control, or personal gain. Instead, an ethical leader is one whose conduct is guided by the value of Ubuntu, humanness, interconnectedness, and dignity. But I want to take it a step further and say one who understands solidarity and one who understands how to share an identity with others. From an Ubuntu perspective, a leader is ethical when they embody this humanness, safeguard dignity, promote harmony. That aspect is so important because harmony it goes beyond simply just saying following what the rules determine is the right action, but always making sense of the context, always making sense of the person, make sense of their epistemological background, and try to balance these things as you make your decision. As I said, an ethical leader is a balancer. They have to balance the interests of so many people. And that means you need to be a fair person and you need to be compassionate. More than this, community or harmony-based theories say we need to focus on organizations and communal harmony rather than emphasizing what to do in specific situations. It emphasizes how people should relate to one another. It enables moral development through relations. Now, I just want to take a segue and say, in academia and in institutions, we are so quick to punish and not understand the circumstances that bring a person to be unethical or to, have some sort of misconduct in their actions. I'm not saying that every case should be unpacked and given the attention of, the whole nation, but it's important that we understand context because, for instance, someone who's stealing a certain thing, if they do come from a context of poverty or hunger, it's different to someone who's just stealing because they want to, prove a point. And we need to be cognizant of this in developing people. And we need to be aware of our positions as those that influence others, that we have power and our power should raise the other's moral development because my Ubuntu is directly tied to the Ubuntu of another person. As the phrase goes, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, I am because we are. So if I'm unable to develop you morally, I have a flaw in my own Ubuntu. And if I can watch you further degrade yourself and let you do that without any intervention, it affects my own personal too, my own Ubuntu. So it's important that we lean on the solidarity we have with people that are in our families and people that are in our communities, our organizations, and the greater society that we find ourselves in. And we need to also ensure that in cases where we find ourselves with other people, we show them that we share an identity by supporting their goals and by also sharing certain goals and ideals with them too. And my penultimate slide, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of solidarity, shared identity, and harmony. Solidarity is important in that we need to support one another ethically, uphold community standards. That means having mutual accountability and responsibility, and also having joint goals. To have Ubuntu doesn't mean that we have zero accountability. It does mean that we have more space to understand context, to get a deeper engagement with those we are in relationships with. But it doesn't mean that things are done uncritically. So we still have the duty to uphold each other and also ethical standards that we set for ourselves. There's also an importance of identity. We act with integrity as part of a respected academic group, or let's just say beyond the academic group, as part of a respected social group. We have to act with integrity. That means even in the absence of someone looking at you, you do the right thing. You follow the guidelines of that group, that space, that society you find yourself in. And harmony means we need to avoid conflict through honest, respectful academic behavior, and work should improve academic communal harmony, meaning we shouldn't always look at punitive measures when there is misconduct, but we should always engage, inform, educate, and moralize, if I could put it that way, but help people grow morally also before being punitive. What we see today is, especially with things like AI and stuff taking over, we are very quick to punish and we do not engage enough to understand. We do not want any sort of deep understanding of the issues, but we rather are quick to take the first solution available to us. So we need to avoid conflict through honest, respectful academic behavior and work should improve academic communal harmony rather than destroy it. Things such as data sharing, responsibility and academic freedom, environmental and societal impacts, and open science are all affected by this Ubuntu perspective. If we were to actually engage with academic endeavors with Ubuntu, we would see changes in all of these spaces, with research being collected differently, with academic freedom being understood fundamentally different, especially that of communities that are researched. I think Prof mentioned something of the type of saying the things that are important and indigenous to the people of the land are no longer even being produced by them anymore. And they do not have the academic freedom. Instead, the standards of academia stifle them when they try to speak about this and they try to engage in these issues that are very important to them. So we need to open the space up, especially when we are talking about communities affected by the research at hand. There are obviously environmental and societal impacts where we need to be more cognizant in how we engage with our environment and our societies, and access to knowledge needs to be opened up. If we have Ubuntu guiding our institution, our leaders, and our state, they should give more access to information, to knowledge, and more open access research spaces should be available. This is just unfortunately part and parcel of the way in which institutions have turned academia into a business, but it's very important that we engage with this. So yeah, I'm gonna stop here because I kind of give a few things on why misconduct is an issue and the problem with resource distribution and knowledge and power, and then finally academic integrity and why we need to like protect it. But if there are any questions, I will engage with these slides. I think I'm on time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for your take on Ubuntu and ethical philosophy and practice. Much appreciated. As we prepare to move to our next speaker, before we do that, I just want us to jump back into the Mentimeter, right? And I'm just going to ask Prof. Cat to guide us through the process. Prof. Cat, over to you. Is Prof. Cat in the room? Is she still in the room? Okay, if she's not here, let me entertain the responses or the reflections, and hopefully as she listens in, she will navigate us through it. The first, the question that was posed to all of us was, how would we deal with unethical leadership practices? And so the responses are in front of us. The first response is don't turn blind eye, report it or confront it. And I think a lot of the answers to this question, a lot of those answers or the statements given is in line with what the speakers have shared. Another participant said, by speaking up, reporting through proper channels, enforcing accountability, and promoting a culture of transparency and ethical behavior. That is, I think, this is similar, or is in a similar vein of what I've read in the beginning with the first participant's response. And what I'm thinking about just out loud is that what happens when we treat when we treat things as a dirty little secret, or as a sin that needs to be hidden, what happens? It normally erodes us as human beings. And it actually, the sin that we're hiding, it doesn't go away, it amplifies, right? And so I think all of these responses, especially the second response that I've just read, alludes to the important and emphasize the important that, the conversation about AI, or the tool as such, is something that should not be taken, as something that should be hidden. It ought to be placed. It ought to be placed at the center of the conversations that we are currently having, as well as in the center of how we ought to navigate, the complexities that comes with AI being part of our social fabric. The next participant responded, conduct immediate disciplinary meetings, and the unethical acts are to be held accounted for. So it's all about accountability, taking responsibility. That is very important, taking responsibility. Another participant wrote, we need to talk ethics from a community or citizen-centered approach. And all of that just speaks about, or conscientizes us about, the importance of not treating it, like I said in the illustration, as a dirty little secret or as a sin that needs to be hidden. We need to engage with it. We need to robust with what is currently happening, so that we do not lose the integrity of who we are as a people, but also everything that has been passed on from generation to generation. Another participant said, address the person if possible, report all cases, follow up on action taken, relook at policy and reporting lines. So what all of this is telling me is that in order for us to navigate navigate the parts that haven't been taken, that we need to do it in community, because all of the participants' responses, which I've just reflected on, all of it had elements of community. And I think our speakers also emphasize the importance of perhaps exercising ethical practices in community, so that it forges a way forward, not just for the individual, but for the community at large. And then I'm just going, it is 2:46. We have up to 2:55 just to reflect and entertain all of the responses on the Mentimeter. Let me just go to another one. Another participant said, confront it without fear and favor. The reason why corruption is continuing, it's because we are scared of being victims. But would you feel right when you unethically happen and you couldn't stand up? I agree with that point made as well. And then another one says, educate those who are guilty, ensure that everyone understands what went wrong, provide an opportunity to address the issue. Finally, punish those who still commit them after all these interventions. There's a sense that that punishment, that punishment is part and parcel of the process. And I just perhaps want to challenge all participants to just perhaps think about what punishment means. Will punishment bring about corrective measures, or will educating and supporting such individuals perhaps lead to better results? Those are just questions that I'm throwing out there as I'm reading your responses. Neo, your hand is up. Yes, Neo, your hand is up.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much. I'm thankful that you could accommodate me, because myself and typing, I could not get to it. But for me, I'm very grateful for the speakers so much that what came to my mind was the concept of Ubuntu Gogi, where we are integrating humanity with pedagogy. Where we know that in classrooms or in the basic education, we are pedagogues. But now, also we said that we need to encourage leadership, meaning it is now adult education. So it means that we now have to look not only integrating humanity, Ubuntu with pedagogy, but with heutagogy as well, which is the art of actually capacitating leadership. Because Ubuntu Gogi, for me, I would appreciate, and I'm so appreciative of Dr. Shabangu's presentation and Prof. Mohale that built me to say, yes, we have, previous discrimination issues, but once we have climbed that mountain, now we are maintaining coloniality. We conquered to be colonized, but now, given the multiple standards of life that we're living, still colonialization happens in a different form. So I am saying that Dr. Shabangu and Prof. Mohale to also emphasize on how we can be able to merge pedagogy and heutagogy using Ubuntu Gogi. Because my question here is simply says, yes, we're looking to social justice to say, if one, as a woman, you uphold ethics, you have principled, and you will be called names. And I was hoping to hear, because Ubuntu, it is an African concept, the Africanness of our African philosophy. But still there is this challenge of patriarchy, to say, the victimization of a woman in leadership upholding ethics. It's hectic as compared to don't just maintain the status quo, but we transform it as well. And we are conscious about how do we actually impart what is expected to our audience. The audience are supposed to be prepared to receive. It's not only about me who's delivering, but yes, no matter how polite I may deliver, but who is receiving? Are we misplaced in leadership? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neo. I'm just going to ask perhaps that we go to the next page. I still have about 2 minutes just to read one or two more of the participants' response. Is there a second page to the response, or is this okay? Here's the second page, right? Let me just read two or more. Another response said, dig deeper towards the root cause of the practice, right? That is very important because I think that that there's always premises behind why people do what they do, right? And so don't silence yourself, confront and make a perpetrator uncomfortable. And uncomfortability is good because uncomfortability forces us to change. It is when we become comfortable that we become stagnant. So I like that response. Another participant said, holding leaders accountable and strengthening policies that promote transparency, integrity, and ethical behavior. And we always need to, remind ourselves that ethics is all about what is right and what is wrong. And what we need to also keep in mind about what is right and what is wrong is that because we're so different, what is necessarily right for me would not be considered right for the next individual and vice versa. And so it is important, to perhaps to engage in these conversations and to create a framework in which leaders ought to navigate themselves working in the different spaces. And so we also, I still have 1 minute left. Let me just take one more response, and I'm taking the following. It reads, we should ensure that accountability is key and consequences follow any unethical action. And I agree with that. Accountability, should be part and parcel of the entire process. And what we need to understand is that leaders cannot be leaders if there are no people following them. And so the people following them ought to keep them accountable, because that is actually, them following the individual is what makes that individual a leader. And so it is 2:55. Thank you so much for engaging in the Mentimeter. And thank you for all of the responses that was given. Much appreciated. We will now go over to Prof. Vitalas Chikoko. Prof. Vitalas Chikoko, if you are in the room, I'm going to ask you to please share your slide, if possible, as I prepare myself to introduce you. Prof. Chikoko, are you with us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me see if I can do exactly what you have requested.
Noted, Prof.
I don't know whether my screen is visible that side.
It is not yet visible, Prof. Nothing is coming up.
All right, okay.
Can I also please ask you, Prof, to switch on your camera?
Yeah, I'll do that. Let me just start by sharing my story.
Something is happening. There we go. All right, but this is there's the PowerPoint. If you could please put it in presentation mode, I'll appreciate it. And thereafter switch on your camera as I introduce you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let me introduce you first. Could you please switch on your camera so that participants can see who you are?
Terms and conditions apply.
Noted.
I'm trying to.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great honor to introduce to you Professor Vitalis Chikoko, who draws on decades of leadership, research, and mentorship across the African continent. He has taught in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa, and is currently at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Prof. Chikoko has edited several books on education and leadership, and his work reminds us that ethical leadership is also about long-term sustainability in our schools, our systems, as well as our societies. Prof. Chikoko, over to you. And again, I just remind you to please switch on your camera.
Let me see if I can do that. Okay. I think you can see me now. Greetings to you, colleagues, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to start with slide 2. Let me see if I can go to slide 2. I wonder why my slides are not moving. What could be? I don't see them moving.
So, Prof, if you can just use perhaps the arrow on your computer.
Yes, that's the one I'm using. My computer is just frozen. I think what I should do is stop share and then restart.
I would advise that you do so, Prof. Thank you.
Let me do this and see if it works.
Thank you, Prof.
Is it back on your screen?
Not as yet. I will tell you when it has loaded, Prof.
Okay, I think it should just now. Let's see.
There's something happening.
There's probably too many things in my. Right, I am restarting because there must be something that my computer is playing games with me, but I will win it.
Thank you, Prof. Let's try it one more time. Prof. Chikoko, if possible, if you could perhaps, if it doesn't work this time around, if you could perhaps just share the slides with one of the organizers, and perhaps they can load it from their side.
Let's see. We will do that if it fails. But I think it will work.
Prof, I'm happy to share it. If you email it to me, I'm happy to share it from my side.
Is it not showing?
We don't see anything.
You don't see anything?
No.
Okay, let me try one more. If it doesn't, then I will send you Kat.
Perfect. Okay, we see your screen now. Yeah, we see your screen now.
You see my screen now?
Correct, yes. But now what you do is don't go into slide presentation. Okay. Check your arrow now.
Let me check my arrow now.
Now
Yeah,
it's coming through. Fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you.
I wanted to start with this slide, which is my slide 2. I was told that this conference is about ethical leadership in education. And so I did a casual check of ethical leadership issues in education in this country. And the 3 things that you see, I've called it the ethics terrain in South African basic education. I started my casual research about ethical leadership in education in this country. 2016, Corruption Watch is saying at least 259 school principals are implicated about financial mismanagement. And 5 years later, another author, Ndlovu et al., found that there is an acute moral and ethical problem of leadership, which is not allowing the functioning of education well in the Department of Education. And another 5 years later, this year, some authors, Shongwane and Bengu, are finding that school principals understood what ethical leadership is, but their practices were fraught with complexities and inconsistencies. This is not systematic literature review. It's just a casual survey of the goings on, but it seems to tell us that the elephant in the room in education is unethical leadership. And so having found that, and let me come back to this one here, I then thought about what it is that we can share. And I thought that we must, as leaders, have what I would call a wait a minute moment. Wait a minute as a leader, give yourself a wait a minute moment and ask yourself about yourself. And so I arrived at this argument that emotional intelligence is a must-have, is a need to have for every leader. So I want to share with you issues around emotional intelligence. And I was happy to hear a previous speaker, Prof. Mohale, in his presentation highlighted the importance of self-leadership. And Dr. Shabangu spoke about self-realization. These are important issues which speak directly to what I want to talk about. So here is a question. Is there anything similar among effective leaders? What I'm finding is that most effective leaders are alike in one important way. They have a high degree of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, if you look at bullet 3 there, the ability to be aware, the ability to control and to express one's emotions, and the ability to handle interpersonal relationships. So we find that, yes, some people would argue that intelligence quotients, people that are highly intelligent, may necessarily be very important and required in organizations. Yes, point taken. Those skills are important. But literature is telling us that emotional intelligence is twice as important as IQ. So we're talking something very, very important. And I'm arguing in the last bullet there to say emotional intelligence is the sine qua non of leadership. In other words, you cannot lead effectively when your emotional intelligence is low. So we will talk briefly. I have got very few slides around this issue about emotional intelligence. There are two dimensions of emotional intelligence, which I want to talk about: managing self and managing relationships with others. Those are the two dimensions of emotional intelligence. So we're talking here about the leader saying to themselves, who am I? So let's talk about the first dimension of self-management. And we're talking here about self-awareness. I have called it Know Thyself. What does it mean? Having a deep understanding of one's emotions, having a deep understanding of one's strength, one's weaknesses, one's needs, and what one's drives. What makes me tick in a normal day? What are the things that I don't do well? What are the things that make me angry? So one with self-awareness is neither overly critical or unrealistically hopeful about themselves. Being honest with oneself and with others. So with high self-awareness, if I know myself very well, I'm able to recognize how my feelings affect me. I'm able to recognize how my feelings affect others. I'm able to recognize how my feelings affect performance among other people in the organization. So knowing oneself is also about understanding one's own values and goals. And do those decisions that I make agree with the values that I cherish? Knowing oneself will mean that I'm comfortable talking about my own limitations and my own strengths. Knowing myself will mean that I am comfortable to ask people for constructive criticism of me. And literature is telling us that people who know themselves, who assess themselves honestly, are better suited to do the same for their organization than people who don't. So one hallmark of self-awareness, one hallmark of being comfortable with oneself is a self-deprecating sense of humor, the ability to self-critique, the ability sometimes even to laugh at myself, at what I've done, to be able to say to colleagues, it looks like I was not listening when I said this and this, because if I had listened, I would not have done things this way and that way. We must ask ourselves, how many times are we able to laugh at ourselves, not just for the sake of it, but as an expression that I'm comfortable, I'm aware that I've got strengths and weaknesses. I'm aware that I'm an emotional person. And that process of self-deprecating is very healthy going forward. Self-regulation, I've called this control thyself. So this is a component of emotional intelligence that frees us from being slaves of our own feelings. We are able to conquer, we are able to control them. Ability to control our feelings, ability to channel those feelings to useful purposes. A self-regulated person is able to create environments of trust and fairness. Trust is key in every organization. And the reason why things don't work sometimes in organizations is that trust levels are very low. But trust levels are not given, they must be built. So this atmosphere of trust and fairness reduces the politics of infighting, the politics of fault finding, and it increases, energy towards productivity. And literature, of course, tells us that a self-regulated person, that kind of ways of doing things has got a trickle-down effect. It is contagious. It goes to other people that you lead. And a self-regulated person is able to cope with change. And when change arises, they do not panic. They are able to suspend judgment. They are able to seek out information. They are able to listen. And then on the basis of that investment, they are able to respond. We can give the example of the advent of COVID and the amount of running like headless chickens that happened in schools in terms of what to do. The amount of shooting in the dark, because it was a crisis. So self-regulated people take time to respond, not because they are just doing it for the sake of it. But you see that investment that must happen. Suspend judgment. Seek out information. Listen. And this thing about listening is very important, because sometimes we are just quiet and looking at a colleague when they speak, but we are not necessarily listening. So a self-regulated person has integrity. Self-regulation is a virtue. And the more self-regulated people we have in organizations, the stronger those organizations become. Motivation, drive thyself, that's what I've called it. So emotional intelligence requires a motivated person. Motivation, the intrinsic desire to achieve. The passion to do the work itself, not for any benefits. And I remember Prof. Mohale referring to public servants. That's an excellent example of where we would want to see a passion for the work itself. Not that in other organizations this should not be the case, but you will agree with me that we often have a drought of a passion for the work itself. What we hear are, what's in it for me? Kinds of questions. An emotionally intelligent person has a love to learn. So sometimes we go to schools and we sit in the principal's office and we see a list of professional development programs that are going to happen in that particular academic year. And all we see, as far as the school principal is concerned, are programs that must happen to teachers. There is no evidence of any professional development that the school principal, him or herself, is seeking to undergo. So the love for learning maybe has stopped. Taking pride in a job well done. The energy to do things better. Being restless with the status quo. Forever raising the performance bar. We can talk the whole day about the performance bar in education in this country. I have argued that when we see learners in South Africa matric, that over 60% of learners in matric would have been opting for mathematics literacy as opposed to mathematics per se. I often ask questions to say, why is it like that? Whose children are doing mathematics literacy? And whose children are doing maths per se? When these children were born, there was nothing wrong with them, all of them. There was nothing that said they could not do maths. And they were born in the same manner that every child was born across the globe. And so I think that the bar sometimes is too low, and then these learners get the impression that mathematics cannot be done. But we all know that when these children come to university, no university is going to recognize maths literacy. So there are issues about the bar, where our bar is in terms of the performance, but this is a discussion for another day. Seeking ways to track progress, remaining optimistic even against failure. So Winston Churchill is said to have said that the pessimist will see problems in every opportunity. The optimist will see opportunities in every situation. So we're talking about self here. If I set the bar high for myself, I am then able to do the same for the organization in which I lead. And it doesn't, if my bar is very low, the chances that I will set a high bar for the followers in my organization are close to zero. So we have been talking about understanding self. Now we are moving to ability to manage relationships. And one of them is empathy. I have called it enrich thy feelings. We're talking here about a leader who is reflecting on themselves. They must thoughtfully consider the feelings of the people they lead. They must be involved in processes of making intelligent decisions. The ability to understand other people, the emotional makeup of other people. But this is far from meaning that you go about trying to please everybody. It doesn't happen like that. This is very important leading teams, because then you are able to sense and to understand the viewpoints of everyone around the table. So sometimes things collapse because the leader is not adequately emotionally intelligent. And there are issues of cross cultures. There is need for cross-cultural dialogue. And in the course of cross-cultural dialogue, misunderstandings arise. But when you have empathy, you are able to go into the subtleties, into the nitty-gritties of how people behave. What does their body language tell me? Can I hear beneath the words pronounced? When I am empathetic within the organization that I lead, the chances that I can retain staff are quite high, because the emotional side of human beings is very, very important. The emotional side of the human being is such that you can uplift somebody who thought that they could not do anything. But if you showed them that you understand where they come from and that it's not all doom and gloom, you can uplift them to greater heights. Social skills, manage thy relationships. The ability, the need to manage relationships with others cannot be overemphasized. The ability to be friendly with a purpose. The ability to move people's energies in the direction of achieving organizational goals. The ability to interconnect and to cross-pollinate ideas with many people. The ability to build rapport. And all you are doing here is that you are starting from the thinking, from the philosophy that nothing important gets done alone. So if we can borrow, I'm not a Liverpool supporter, but maybe for a minute, I can borrow their story to say, you will never walk alone. So this social skill of relating with others is a combination of the other dimensions of emotional intelligence. And people who have social skills tend to be effective at managing relationships when they understand and can control their own emotions. This is why I called it a wait a minute moment, that I must reflect about myself. So when you are such socially skilled, you are then likely to be able to manage teams. And when you are such skilled, you are likely to be a good expert persuader. And persuasion is paramount. If we went back to defining what leadership is all about, you can't win it if you are not able to get buy-in. If you have such social skills, you are likely to be an excellent collaborator. And you have no difficulty spreading work to other people. So this thing about trust will allow you to be free and spread work to others. And when you do that, and those people are emotionally happy about what you are doing, you are not relegating, you are delegating. So what we are finding here is that research is telling us that, yes, there's some genetic component of emotional intelligence, but nature plays a significant role as well. Therefore, emotional intelligence can be learned, but it takes time. It takes time, not lifetime. It takes commitment. All things that are good must necessarily take commitment. And the benefits make it worth the effort. Emotional intelligence increases with maturity, but maturity does not translate to chronological age. So we must help people in our organizations to mature. So I want to end by saying, colleagues, if by the end of the day, you have forgotten, you can't make any head or tail of the things that we were talking about, I want to leave you with 3 things. That ethical leadership, ask yourself three questions. Am I upholding, am I practicing high moral practices? 2, am I upholding the well-being of the people I'm tasked to lead? And 3, in the process of doing that, am I able to achieve the organizational goals that we are tasked to do? Those 3 will summarize what ethical leadership is all about, what emotional intelligence in the process is all about. Thank you very much. Over to you, Program Director.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chikoko. And thank you to all of our speakers for such thought-provoking and practical insights. Now we'd like to hear from you, our participants, whether it's a burning question or just a quick reflection. Now's the time to share. It is 3:33, which means that we have about 12 to 13 minutes for Q&A. I'm going to ask you to raise your virtual hand to speak, and our team will unmute you, or alternatively, you can post your thoughts in the chat box and we'll respond as time allows. Please remember to keep your questions clear and directed to a specific speaker or topic. And remember, all voices are welcome in this space. And perhaps I should start off. Okay, I see Fatima, you have your hands up. And then Liesl Hastings.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for really informative information. It is something to think about. My take on this, and I just want to share, most of the young leaders that go into society piggyback on a mentor. And unfortunately, if the leaders that are currently in the system are unethical, that is the trends that they will follow because they will think it is acceptable in society. Now, this is where taking us back, if we really want to make changes, unfortunately, trying to teach your old dog tricks, you cannot do that, excuse the pun, but it's not intended on anybody. It's just that if we want to make changes, we'll have to take the young leaders and teach them everything that has been said in this conference, because I mean, fantastic ideas, wonderful interpretations, applications. And if one could take everything that was said and learned in this conference and taken it through to young leaders, then I do believe we will have fantastic leaders of tomorrow. But currently, as it stands, their mentors have already been stained. And that stain just carries on and filters through to the next leaders. So that's my contribution.
Thank you so much for sharing, Fatima. Liesl, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you.
We will go over to Sipho.
Yes, thank you. And once again, I'd just like to appreciate the presenters. Mine is just a comment around Dr. Chikoko's, and I'm sorry if I pronounce it incorrectly, message, but yes, you know, EQ, I mean, if one can even get a psychopath to adapt their by nurturing to adapt their psyche so that one can get them to train, then I can't see how we cannot get our leaders to adjust. But having said that, also is going to a lot depend, and I piggyback on what the previous speaker said. A lot of it is going to depend on where those people are. And unfortunately, too much in the education field is based on political relationships, let's call it that. And that is a problem. I remember teaching a class just quickly that actually the children in the classroom actually said, and it was a grade 7 class, so you're looking at 13-year-olds, and they actually said to, their comment was, why should we do anything differently? Because at the end of the day, we're not going to achieve anything different. And that was what their comment was. Obviously, I'm not going to go into how that turned out. That's irrelevant. But like she says, that's what's happening. We have to teach them differently. But my point being, if one can train a psychopath by EQ, then one can also train our leaders. So what I would like to say is perhaps when one is looking at what the students are doing at college and what is being taught to them at college in terms of modules, etc., perhaps something in that line needs to be brought in. That is my contribution, I think.
Well, thank you so much. Before I attend to any of the other hands that have been put up, I just want to go into the chat box just to look at some of the questions that were posed. The first question that was posed, and it's a question that is extended to the speakers. Speakers, please take note that if you are going to respond to the question, that one speaker, that I ask that one speaker respond to just one question. And so I'm just going to read out the questions that have been posed by the participants. This is Blessing, and Blessing is asking, given the announcement made by UCT about AI use in higher education, where do you stand? Should AI be adopted as an academic tool? And then again, we also have questions from Sonwabo Lindani. Got 6 questions, but I'm only going to read one question that one of the speakers can perhaps respond to. And the question that I want to take from Sonwabo is, what strategies do you use to promote a culture of integrity and accountability within your organization? And then again, a question from Chantal, and I think Chantal mostly directed her question towards Dr. Shabangu. And the question is, should we really avoid conflict, or we should find a way, or should we find a way to resolve it, right? And then I also have a question by Tintswalo, and Tintswalo's question is, how do we rebuild our schools to be a sanctuary of hope for our young ones? And then the last question that I just want to reflect on is a question from Zandile. And Zandile is asking, how can we engage or empower the home as an institution to help instill leadership principles, given that citizens are first born and raised here? And so I'm just going to give an opportunity perhaps for the speakers just to respond to the questions that was read out aloud. And if time allows us, I will return back to their hands that are still up. In no particular order, Prof. Mohale, Dr. Tony, Prof. Chikoko, you can respond to any of the questions I've just read out loud.
Well, can I respond to conflict?
Go ahead, Prof.
The term conflict, in fact, is not necessarily negative in all cases. In fact, organizations without conflict at all are almost dead. Some amount of conflict is necessary for an organization to move forward. And so it's not something that we need to close and lock away. Yes, we know that there is conflict that can reach highs that become toxic, but conflict could actually point to people thinking, people coming up, seeking alternative ways of doing things. And that should be allowed. This is why you find organizations now tend to talk more about conflict management than conflict resolution. Because it's not always about stopping it. It's not always about resolving it. It's about managing it such that we still leave room for people to have different perspectives over an issue. And that makes us to keep thinking. That puts us on our toes. So conflict must be managed and not necessarily completely shut down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Shabangu, Prof. Mohale, you can go ahead.
Okay, since the conflict one has been dealt with, maybe to respond to the issue about leaders being born at home first. That is absolutely true. I think we have grown as a society to assume that leaders are created in institutions such as universities, or political spaces, but these places are all actually a network of one another. You can't expect someone to learn to be a leader if it doesn't start at home. And it speaks to the grounding of Ubuntu, saying that we need to always have certain moral values that are harmonious, not only in the home space, but in our society and wherever we find ourselves. So I agree 1000% in saying that leaders are born at home, and there's a big obligation for us as society to not always wait for the legalities of the state to define what we should be doing to empower our young leaders. We need to take it upon ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shabangu. Is Prof. Mohale in the room as well? Would you like to respond to one of the questions? If Prof. Mohale is not in the room to respond, I have 1 minute left, and so I'm just going to give it to Sipho. Sipho, if you can just be unmuted so that you can share your reflection.
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. I nearly said good evening. Wow, I truly enjoyed the leadership conference. This past 2 days, I've been also learning a lot about myself and also reflecting in number of organizations that I'm part of as a leader. So I have about 3 questions that I will ask my speakers. So my first question will be directed to Dr. Shabalala, pertaining to the organizational culture. So my question is, how can personal development programs support professional growth and moral responsibilities? So I'll repeat, how can personal development programs support both professional growth and moral responsibilities? And my other question that will be directed to Prof. Chikonko. We're focusing on the assessment and fairness. So I would like to know that how can we design an assessment that that is fair, inclusive, and free from a cultural bias. So how can we design a fair, inclusive, free from cultural bias? And then my last question to Dr. Mohale, if he's online. So this one will be focusing on personal development and leadership. So then my question would be, in what way can leaders balance accountability with empathy when dealing with students or staff conflict? In what way can leaders balance accountability with empathy when dealing with students and staff? So thank you so much for this amazing session. I'm looking forward on getting the responses on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sipho, for your questions. Dr. Shabangu and Prof. Shikoko, in short, do you have a response?
I think I may have missed some of the question because on my line it dropped, but I'm assuming it's about moral development, right?
Correct.
Okay, so essentially, moral development depends on having communities that are aligned with certain values. And it starts by having communities of Ubuntu, for instance, where people learn from other people how to be good people. You can't learn how to develop morally without having other people, and they are the checks and balances that say whether or not you are developing. So we need to first work on developing communities that are safety nets for anyone who finds themselves regressing morally. And these communities should be in such a way that even when you leave your own neighborhood, you find another set of people that holds the same set of values. So it starts there by formulating communities that are actual safety nets for moral degenerates.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabangu. Prof. Chikoko, your response
thank you,
is short.
Sipho, for your question. How can we design a fair assessment scheme? When we assess students, assessment is suggesting that a journey has been traveled to be able to assess what has been being taught. So before we assess that journey is where the answers are. And the problem is that we don't listen. We keep quiet and pretend to listen, but we are not listening. The problem is that we don't provide enough spaces for all the voices to be heard. And so because we don't know these different cultural nuances, we don't know enough. We tend then to have assessments that are not suitable. So the learning journey should be one of engagement, should be one of listening, should be one of allowing voices. And then we are able to understand one another. But then, Sipho, from your picture, you're a young man, I want to throw a spanner in the works a bit, because we have difficulties with students who don't come to class. And so how do we engage? When a class that is supposed to be 200 students, only half of the students have arrived there. So when are you going to provide space for you to be listened to? I'm not necessarily talking exactly about you as an individual. I'm raising an issue that I think most universities are facing. The student is not arriving at classes. And this is something that you, the young people, must deal with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Chikoko, for your response. Due to time, it is 3:51. We will now immediately, go to the next segment. But before we do that, I just want to thank all participants for your questions and your reflecting statements. And I encourage you to, to perhaps make contact or reach out to our speakers if there are still lingering questions or burning questions that you would like them to address. For now, we're just going to pause for inspiration as I call upon Lesedi, who will share a poem that just really captures the heart of today's conversation, a call for ethical leadership rooted in connection, compassion, and community. Lesedi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dion. Good afternoon, everyone. The name of the poem is Behold the Turtle, Behold Ubuntu. The turtle moves only when it dares, stretching its neck into uncertain air. So too must leaders risk the light, choosing truth, though shadows fight. Leading for enrichment has become an increasing problem. Leadership must be framed by Ubuntu, rational, not political. As Dr. Shabangu reminds us, Ubuntu is not a slogan nor philosophy alone, but an ethic to be embedded in structures, guiding institutions, professions, nations. The shell the turtle carries is conscious, strong, a guard against corruption song. Integrity cannot be put aside, its armor, the compass, the guide. Ethical leadership is relational, shaped through interdependence, nurtured in character, for leaders are custodians of the common good. Respect is earned by walking the talk, by valuing skills and contributions at every level. Respect and care are one entity. Taking responsibility avoids blame games. Leadership is about service, not self-enrichment, about decolonizing knowledge, centering dignity, restoring suppressed voices to the circle of decision. To be ethical requires pause, a self-check before every choice. The numbers from research are clear: 259 principles implicated in financial mismanagement. Leaders may understand ethics in theory, yet practice is fraught with contradictions. Self-awareness is essential. Know yourself, assess yourself honestly, be unafraid to speak both strengths and limitations. Step by step, not swift but sure, ethics endure where shortcuts lure. Servant leadership is not submissive, it is courage in service of society. Education, sacrosanct, a duty of care to every learner and teacher, a shaping of the nation, a stewardship of sustainability. The courage to speak up meets resistance and consequences that cost lives. Jobs for cash scandals, abuse of power, exploitation, and victimization. Silence here is betrayal. I am compelled to speak, to call others to courage for what is wrong with caring, what is wrong with disruption if it heals what is broken. Behold the turtle, steady and wise. Its pace is slow, yet its progress endures. So too must leadership look beyond today, beyond the here and now, to interconnection, to justice, to the transformation of institutions. Work together, stand together in times of uncertainty. Model values, live Ubuntu, for leadership measured in lasting gain is patient, principled, clear, humane. Behold the turtle. Ethical progress is where its courage lies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lesedi, for the beautiful poem that gives a synopsis of the conversations all of our speakers had. And now, our book giveaway, right? If you've joined us earlier, you'll remember we're giving away 5 copies of Prof. Mohale's book. So let's see who the lucky winners are, who have been chosen over the course of the 2 days. Before I call upon Mandy to announce the winners, I do want to congratulate each and every one of you in advance, and thank you for engaging so meaningfully throughout the 2 days. Mandy?
Hi, Dion.
Hi, Mandy. You can go ahead and announce the 5 winners.
There's no drum roll.
I'm trying. Let me do it. There we go. There we go. It is a competition.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. And we're still going to have our closing remarks. I think just to announce our winners for today, which the criteria was mainly engaging, being part of the session. It was indeed very difficult. Our judges has been to and fro, and really trying to announce who the winner, trying to get who the winners are. But we've had a very sort of engageful session. So our winners then go straight to the point. Dion, it's Mapuru Mia. Do we still have Mapuru Mia here?
I think the hand was just raised, yes.
Okay, we have Mapuru Mia. Then we have Neo Doreen.
I'm here.
Thank you, Neo. Chantel Dlamini. Do we have Chantel Dlamini in the house? Yes, I can see Chantel Dlamini. Liesl Hastings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kaiser Kizu. Are you still here, Kaiser? Kezia? Oh, yes. Kaiser Kizu still here. Okay, and a big congratulations to our winners. Thank you, Dion. Right back to you. So Lisedi Malimela would liaise with you to get your delivery address so that we can courier the books to wherever the address is. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mayor Mandy. And as we come to a close, I now want to call upon Dr. Omotayo, who will be giving us our key learnings over the course of today. Dr. Omotayo.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, it has been a great day here today to learn and to unlearn or to relearn. As us, we have come to learn what is expected of us, either a old leader or a young leader. As we find ourselves in our spaces, what is expected of us as a leader. We've been exposed right away from the Professor presentation earlier on ethical leadership. And we were given about 6 principles that we can put into place if we must imbibe an ethical leadership within our space. Talked about respect, accountability, justice, service, and honesty. In fact, the word honesty was replaced with trust. And this resonates from all the presentations we've had today. Also, our book reviewer gives us what is expected of us, even from the perspective of African ideology in our leadership. That is leadership starting from self-leadership. When you understand yourself, and I think the other speakers, especially when we're talking about emotional leadership, emotional intelligent leadership, it was also mentioned and emphasized on self-awareness. So leading to attract others, to create environment of trust was something that were mentioned clearly today, wherever we find ourselves. And Dr. Tony gave us an overview of moral and legality of leadership when it comes to Ubuntu ideology and how to create an environment that see not only yourself, but you see others too. And it is summarized as I am here because you are here. If you are not here, I won't be here. That means no leadership without followership. Also, in the times of emotional intelligence, it was so clearly that as a leader, we need to be equipped with emotional intelligence skills such as self-management and relationship skills that will enhance our ethical behavior in our leadership space. So today, most things have been said, and I know we have a lot to take home to reflect on, not just only to reflect, to practice as we go back to our various schools, organizations, and even at home, where we occupy a space as a leader. Thank you for your coming. Thank you for time. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omotoyo, for your the synopsis of the key learnings that transpired today. I'm now going to call upon Mayor Mandisa Tsalane for her final words of thanks as the representative of Kagiso Trust. So let us leave here inspired, not just to talk about ethical leadership, but to live it. Over to you, Mayor Mandisa.
Thank you, Dion. Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Dion. So I think we've had the most wonderful and insightful and a very productive 2 days. I must say thank you to everyone who's here. Dion, as we conclude this schools leadership conference, I think there's just one very key message that stands out. And it stands out very clear that the growth of our teachers is the growth of our nation. And I think it's the view we hold very dear at Kagiso Trust, because of our theory of change is centered around continuous teacher development. And I agreed, it came out very strong in this conference that a lifelong learning is the foundation on which every school must be built upon. Is the foundation that inspires, it transforms, and it gives hope. So I think it's something that we can really take away. On day one, we were reminded that every leader in education is a role model. Whether you are a classroom teacher, a member of a school management team, a principal, or a district leader, young people are watching. They look up to us for inspiration, for hope, and for guidance. So what we do as leaders has profound implications for their lives. As part of day one, we also spoke frankly about the dark side of power. It's very critical. How bullying, absenteeism, we have seen it in the areas that we are operating in, corruption, or self-interest, it destroys schools and it steals trust. Leadership without ethics disillusions learners. They learn from that. But we hope that this conference inspired leadership of integrity, which builds trust, inspires hope, and shape our future leaders. Today's speakers have sharpened that, this truth for us. So Professor Peterson called us to embrace brave leadership, servant leadership anchored in accountability. And Professor Bonang Mohale through his conversations with Prof. Ket, reminded of us of the richness and wisdom in African leadership and narratives, which is something that us as African in this continent, we should really hold dearly. Dr. Shabang and Prof. Chikoko demonstrated how Ubuntu, through collaboration and emotional intelligence, can strengthen schools. And I agree, Prof. And we will still from Liverpool. I'm also not a supporter, but teachers, the leaders in this conference, you should know that you will never walk alone. So across these 2 days, I think key takeout from this conference, what came out very strongly, Ubuntu, we are bound to one another. So leadership must be grounded in humanity and service. Collaboration is power. We use this a lot as part of the African adage, reminds us all the time that it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to educate a child. And so schools thrive when communities, parents, and leaders work together. Continuous teacher development, key takeout. Lifelong learning for teachers is the key to preparing our learners for tomorrow. So, colleagues, I think let us live with this commitment to invest in our teachers, to embrace lifelong learning, and to resist the temptation of the dark side of power. Let us remember that we are always role models and that the future of our learners are shaped not as much by what we do, but also by what we say. I will end here, Dion, as I conclude, but I would really like to quote the words of Professor Wangari Maathai, spoken in her Nobel Peace Prize lecture in 2004. She says, I quote, "Those of us who have been privileged to receive education, skills, and experiences, and even power, must be role models for the next generation of leadership." So I hope that today, as we leave here, we carry her words into our schools, into our communities, so that we can build this nation. Colleagues, on behalf of Kagiso Trust and the University of Johannesburg Faculty of Education, the whole Orange team, again, we say congratulations to our book winners and a sincere and a deep, 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 deep thank you to the organizers of this conference, our technical team, our facilitators, and our speakers. But most importantly, we thank you, our participants who took the time to be part of this Schools Leadership Conference and be engaging actively. So as we close this conference, we are not closing the engagements. Please let us continue with these conversations across all our platforms. And remember from the article that we learned this morning that maybe leadership must be taught and must be rehearsed daily and not be performed occasionally. Colleagues, thank you so much for being here. Dion, thank you as I officially close the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Mandisa. And on that high note, keep well, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.